what I do have is a very particular set of skills that I've acquired over a very long career. Skills that can make a nightmare for miniatures like you. On a podcast known as
Trapped Under Plastic, the podcast where the burning questions have nothing to do with the gonorrhea.
That's good.
Ugh. I'm Scott, joined by my co-host John, and we are your virtual hobby buddies. John, what did you paint this last week?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to jump right into painting. And, you know, this is a little behind the looking glass of what we're going to talk about in the main topic today. But we're switching things up a little bit here today. We're going to start with mini time. And that could be what we've painted. It could be a project we're working on, building, kit bashing, all that fun stuff related to the hobby. And we're just going to dig into the hobby. First things first, I painted... I don't know how to pronounce this person's name. Alexis.
Actual first things first.
What you got there? Is that Daidu?
It's Daidu, baby.
Oh, man. Well, I'll paint you. I'll forward you my Alexis.
You're going to paint me like one of your French minis?
Yes. This is one of the new... It's a new Eldar Spider Hero.
God damn!
Yeah, but
cracking all the cold ones.
Right?
Wow, look at this fucking paint job. You're an artist, bro.
It's just wild and crazy times.
Oh my gosh.
So this model...
yeah, describe it for the audio listeners.
Oh yeah, this is okay. It is known as like the spider. It's the Warp Spider Hero. So it's supposed to have 8 arms. As you can see, mine only has 6.
Yeah, what happened there?
It actually the ones that are on top, that are on her shoulder pads. I realized it was a her. I'm sorry, internet. I didn't realize it was a her because
how could you?
There's
did you put this video out and everyone yelled at you?
yes.
Yeah.
There's no boob armor on this Eldar, and female Eldar boob armor exists.
Yeah.
I would notice that.
And that's the only reason that you would know that someone is a female or a male in the 40K universe.
I also got yelled at because I didn't. How do I phrase this? Is exactly as the comment said. You didn't take the 1 minute of time to do research on the lore of the character before you painted it. And I'm like, that's not what I fucking do.
Did you feel extreme shame over that comment?
I felt extremely something, but it wasn't shame. But I did what I usually do in those situations, and I closed the YouTube Creator app.
As calmly as possible.
Yeah.
I think the biggest moment like that for me was when someone actually me about how to pronounce the word Aquila. Because it's not Akia, it's not like a double L sound.
Yeah.
It's Aquila. And I heard it from multiple people when I got that wrong the first time.
IKEA is where you buy the furniture you can make at home.
Oh, wait. I thought you were going to go for like a car thing there, but then you went with furniture thing.
Yeah. IKEA. IKEA is, that's a car.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That will break down.
Okay. What I've noticed before you even tell me anything about this paint job is obviously using a lot of warm colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Using a lot of warm colors.
So you turn it around.
I know the blue's on the back, but the front is a lot of different kinds of warms. Orangey warms, maroon warms, like more standard, just straight down the middle reds on the helmet. And I feel like I wouldn't think this would work in my head, but it's working.
Yeah, it's a Zorn palette. So
The blue too?
Yep. Desaturated blue and a desaturated green are both in the Zorn. Depending on where you go find the Zorn, right?
It's like a Pokemon.
Yeah, if you find the Zorn in the bushes behind the 7-Eleven, it's going to be a slightly different Zorn than the one you find in Paris.
Sounds like a Power Ranger, dude.
Yeah.
Zorn, no!
Yeah, wasn't Zorn? Zorn is something from the Power Rangers, too. Zorn.
It's something with the Z.
Yeah, there's a Z in there somewhere.
I think it's the bad guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Zord.
Zord. Yes.
We got there. I know you can quit yelling at your phone right now as you're listening to us. So what I did when I painted this model was I started with a pure light sketch, but instead of using like our good buddy Ben Cantor does, he starts with a light sketch in grayscale. Everything from black up to pure white to really define the volumes and the brightness values correctly in black and white. But I just did that all with the Zorn palette. I put all the colors on my palette, and I just went around and I made from a pure light gray primer. I put the bright yellow highlights on first, so they're right over a light primer, and so you're not building them up over dark colors, and it you don't get that immediate punch. And so I kind of worked in reverse. I went brightest. Okay, here's where it would be brightest. And maybe I'd mix in a little bit of orange to that. The secondary parts will be less bright up on her thighs and like down on her feet and stuff. And added more like terracottas and some more reds and stuff. And I ended up with a whole model painted with the color changes and shifts with just light, but it was using these colors. And then so the model was basically like painted, but the details weren't like crisply defined and stuff. And I'm like, oh shit, but I don't want this whole thing to look like it's orange, orange and red, right?
Yeah.
So then I got myself in this weird situation of like, okay, now how do I paint from here to change the colors, but not fuck with the light feeling too much? And so my approach was, I'm just going to go back and define shapes and paint the mid-tones in a different color.
Okay.
So like on her legs, I painted them like it's like a desaturated, slightly cold gray to be almost like the armor is really dark, almost black. But I kept the shadow tones and I kept the highlights. And I kind of smoothed that transition a bit so they wouldn't be as super, super vibrant as this is a darker material. And I just went around the model and painted different colors, kind of doing that. And I kept the reds and the really warms on the helmet. I wanted that to be the focal point.
Okay. And hold on, I have questions before we move on.
Yeah.
So you did a light sketch with the Zorn palette. When you do a light sketch, you use two colors, white and black. Were you using two colors from the Zorn palette on the entire model?
Yeah, I used all the colors.
Okay. And were you specifically changing colors when you like went to a different part or a different material on the model?
No, I treated the model as if it was a Sasquatch, and it's all it's all the same material.
Yeah. Well, what does Sasquatch Eldar look like?
Oh, I wonder if he's just squished into an Eldar suit and you just see his poofy head coming out the top because he's not wearing a helmet.
He's got like hair coming out of the crack.
Yeah. Where the plates meet, there's just fur popping out.
Yeah.
And I assume he's way too big for their suits, so there's like a 6-inch gap between like the calf plate and the knee thing. Yeah. He's like Chewbacca trying to fit into C-3PO.
Right. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so many comments about everything you just said, but we're gonna keep it for later.
So yeah, it was just kind of I got myself into this weird predicament, and I did not know how to finish the model, and so I'm like, well, I can't undo a lot of that. Like it was more of like, how do I refine while still holding true to the cool parts that happened in that light sketch with the Zorn palette.
Okay. The vibe this model gives me is like you are really pushing the limits and seeing what you can get away with artistically. I don't know if that was in your head at all, but like there are just so many choices on this model that seem unique and different and like maybe not necessarily exactly like your normal style. And so to me, this feels boundary pushing. I don't know why it feels that way, but it does.
Oh, thank you. It was I found that I really enjoy lately, over the last probably 12 months, especially, the part of painting where it is kind of this freeing use of paint and color and not worrying about the tiny details and getting the satisfaction of putting colors in weird places and not stressing about the final outcome. That whole exploration part of the beginning paint job of a model takes away from me a lot of the stress and the overwhelming feeling of how much time it's going to take to paint something.
Okay.
If I can like push through that and have fun, I get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, now that I'm done with my fun stuff, I'm like 60-70% done with this model, and now I go in and focus on the details. I want to push that detail focus as far down the road as I can while I'm enjoying myself. And that's is like this whole journey, I think, that I'm trying to find different ways and define a style that uses that. So my style is associated with my personal fun in painting.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And honestly, that's probably a good lesson for all of us. I feel like a lot of us, whenever we engage in any kind of hobby, in this case miniature painting, we kind of like start out doing it the way that we see others around us doing it, right? Because that feels like that's the way you're supposed to engage in that hobby. But then you're like, okay, I know I want to paint, but I also need to make it fun for myself to make it sustainable. And so I'm going to address the parts of the hobby that I don't like and make some changes. And that takes like, I think, time and like some kind of experience and wisdom in the hobby that you're doing. But it's so simple, but something that I feel like a lot of people just never do. Like, they never just do like a retrospective. It's like, what am I not enjoying? Let's minimize that. You know? Yeah. I think that's amazing. That's amazing.
Also, a quick shout out, because I learned about these from here, and the wonderful people at Kraut Scenics sent me over some. This uses the Grimdark Kraut Scenics basing stuff. There's a fucking femur on there.
Oh.
There's little twigs. There's a skull.
Dude, I love that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
A bunch of little great little. Did you paint it, or did you just put it on there and glue it down?
It's painted.
Okay.
It's painted because I did the base in the same. I actually started. I didn't know where to begin. I put the paints on my palette, and I'm like, I don't know where I'm gonna go. And oftentimes, if I don't know where I'm gonna go with a paint job, but I just want to fling some colors around, I put some colors on my palette, and I start by painting the base. So I started by wet blending from the weird bluish olive tones in the back up to magentas and terracottas in the front, of just wet blending the base. So it was like a smooth color transition. And then that was like, okay, well, if that's like that, and that looks like a pretty cool starting point, I'll work my way up to the beam that she's standing on, and then I'll fuck with her like energy spiderweb thing. Mm-hmm. And then I just went into the model, and it felt like you not only painted your base, you've created a base for you to feel free to make more decisions.
Okay,
so
interesting.
I did paint it, but I did slap down. They sent me some of their scenic glue too. I just like squirted it right out of the bottle onto the base, threw some of the stuff down on it, squish it down a little bit, let it dry, and then primed it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah. I think that stuff can also be used unpainted if you're feeling like a degenerate.
Yes,
you know,
it can.
It has a bunch of fun poppy colors in it just to begin with. Like a lot of the different varieties have like little tiny like static grass like bits in it. I'm telling this for the viewers. I think you know this already.
Yeah.
But I think I learned this from Luke, the late Luke, Affordable Paint Service, geek gaming guy.
He's not dead.
He's not dead. His channel is dead for now. You know, never say never.
Yeah,
Actually, he's making airsoft videos now.
Yeah, he's shooting guns that shoot little rubber pellets at people.
Yeah, dude, you can't keep the YouTuber away from the YouTube.
No, it was so funny. It was just like randomly saw that popped up. I'm like, Luke, don't you fucking do it, man.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I learned that from them, and also Zorpazorp, that like there's this whole world of people that just put basing material down on the base and just seal it with matte scenic sealant. And that's like, that works, and it's enough for them, and it matches their paint scheme, and they like almost engineer the paint scheme around doing that so they don't have to paint it. And it's like, okay, that's a nice time-saving tip.
You could totally see that with this stuff, because it's got the specific one. It has like different colors of almost like sandy textures. One's like a granite color, one's like a pure sand color. There's the rocks, or different kinds of rocks that are tiny in there.
There are some that are glossy, little glossy shard like rocks, and then matte ones.
There's little like 2-scale twigs and sticks and stuff that have dimension to them. They have color depth and stuff. And then of course the actual bones and stuff are a bone color. Now they are, I believe, resin, so they don't have depth of the bones don't, so they might stick out a little bit like Boner in sweatpants. But you could just glue that stuff down, and then even do like a quick like throw an Agrax or a shade or something over the whole thing before you sealed it to add a little bit more dimension. But you wouldn't even need to do that, really. It is a far cry from the other thing that I brought that I'm going to talk about painting, but I want to take a break from my stuff, and I want to look at this vast amount of Deldar I see on the table.
This is 1/5, maybe even less of what I have been working on. So you're talking about artistic freedom and feeling the flow. I'm over here fucking sweating, fucking making sure that I am spending my time as effectively as possible. Keyword effectively. I'm not saying that I'm fast. I'm just trying to like
be efficient.
I'm trying to be efficient with my time, yeah. But I have goals, okay? I feel like when I'm painting an army, I want it to look as good as humanly possible with as little time invested as possible. That does not mean that I'm investing little time, relatively. But that means that I'm going to employ strategies that are otherwise difficult to accomplish with a brush in different ways to get a higher quality result. So like an example of that is like using an airbrush to get big blends on these big Ravager bodies and stuff like that. Or using really intricate decals that have cool shading on them that matches the shading of my vehicles. Or intense masking, so I can like break the ship up into a two-tone color, so it's not just khaki, it's khaki and black, you know. So these are time-consuming things, but they get me really good results without needing to have a lot of skill or spend a lot of time with the paintbrush. And so that's what I mean when I say I'm trying to be effective with my time, not necessarily fast. So last week we talked about like dealing with my Dark Eldar army.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat down and I made a schedule from now until the last day that I have to paint before I leave for Adepticon. And I broke it down into a schedule of what I need to finish each week before I move on. And week 1 and 2, I scheduled the hardest and the thing I didn't like the most right up front, just to get it out of the way.
Smart.
And it was
or terrible. I'm not sure.
We'll find out after this podcast. And so I scheduled 4 Raiders and 1 Ravager for me to paint in the first 2 weeks. And 2 of them weren't assembled. And I also wanted to paint all the crew. Each vehicle has 5 dudes in it, so that's 25 dudes. Okay, so it's not just painting 5 rhinos. Okay, I could paint 5 rhinos in 2 weeks. That'd be fucking easy. Okay,
Well, not easy, but it would be easier than this.
I think it'd be easy. I shouldn't say that. But this is 5 vehicles and 25 dudes. Now, I am skipping some steps that I would normally do on the crew, that I would normally do on like a Cabalite Warrior or something like that. But I don't really like what Raiders look like. It's not my favorite ship. I love the Razorwing. I think that's a beautiful vehicle. I love the Venom. I think it's beautiful. I love Reaver jet bikes. I love those.
Reaver jet bikes.
Yeah, they're all sick, but the Raider, it doesn't really do it for me. But if you put the full crew on there, hanging off the edges, looking like goddamn pirates, it looks twice as good, literally twice as good. And so I was like, I'm going to bite the bullet. I know some people skip the crew painting thing, but I'm just going to do it because it makes the vehicle look better, and I don't like the way it looks to begin with. So, holy cow, dude. Either I am just so slow or I bite off more than I can chew. But really, this is not just a painting project. I'm also 3D printing a bunch of unique heads for my Dark Eldar, and I'm trying to find the right scale. I'm even going so far as to stretch them in like one dimension and not all dimensions because they felt a little too narrow. So I wanted to fatten them up a little bit, just a little bit. And so I done some 3D printing tests for heads, and I've nailed it. I did some printing of succulents, and then I spent a long time essentially making a custom decal sheet with a bunch of different like suns and sun rays and all kinds of stuff. And so, okay.
That's where your time is going.
It is. I know. Going to fucking Target to get an inkjet printer. Because my inkjet printer just didn't work. I bought ink for my inkjet printer, and I was like, let's do this. And it's perpetually paper jammed. There's no fucking paper in it.
Why does it say paper when there is no paper jam?
I was like Googling, and I'm like, why am I Googling? I'm just gonna go get a new one. But I found out that printer had broken plastic gears inside of it, and so it was just forever fucked.
Ice cream scoop that out.
Yeah.
Just take an ice cream scoop, rip it out, and hit print.
Rip out the plastic gears?
That is how printers work. They wait until you spend $80 in new ink, and then they fucking break.
Dude, yeah.
Every time.
It was, so I bought new ink, I put it in there, and it was broken. I was so mad, and then I went to Target, and I got another one, and I've been experimenting with my Cricut, with white decal paper, clear decal paper. There's honestly so much to talk about. I could talk for like 20 minutes. Which is funny because like that vehicle isn't that painted, you know? But there are 4 others just like that over in that room painted to that particular stage of the paint job. Yeah, and it just takes forever, dude.
Yeah, you have a lot of you have like all your important large sections all done.
Which is why it's varnished gloss, and it's about to get decals, custom decals, and then an oil wash, and then a matte varnish to hide the decal edges and bring it back to more of a usable finish, and then the detail painting begins. So just to give you an idea, you see the splines in between the sails?
Yes, that immediately I look like that looks like it would suck, dude.
Bro, okay. So I airbrushed the black on the sails. I masked off some of the ship so I wouldn't get black on the rest of the ship. I painted that, and then I hand painted each of those splines. and there are 5 of these ships. That operation, painting over black with khaki to get opaque color on 5 of these fucking ships, took like 5 hours.
Yeah.
It took 5 fucking hours. And I'm just base coating.
Yeah.
And so this is why I'm trying to avoid the paintbrush as much as humanly possible, because it just adds on so much time.
I was kind of trying to figure it out in my head which way you did it. I had thought you painted everything khaki like you did with everything here, and then you with a thin black, even like an ink or something that's really potent but thin, you hand brushed the black and not touched the little sail parts, and then you just went in with your airbrush and hit that middle. That's why I was like, that's what I would have guessed you would have done.
I feel like I couldn't consistently apply black ink or any kind of like product like that with
not have some kind of a
like
brush
overlap
stroke
or something like that. Yeah, of layers. Yeah, some kind of obvious texture.
It makes sense the way you did it because that black is super smooth.
Right.
And it looks so good, but you're absolutely right. Like that, there's no way to go over pure black with that khaki without it taking like 5 coats.
Yeah, and just taking my time, putting on some jams and just sitting there and painting forever.
And it's like each of these 2 lower ones specifically, it's like this. They're like the thickness of a sewing needle.
Yeah.
So you have to be so exact.
Yeah, and I overshot it. You can see I probably fixed it a little bit with like a little thin black line. I used black ink and I just painted it right up to the edge with like a super thin and long hair bristle brush. And I kind of just rode the detail all the way to the end.
That's good because it kind of reinforces the shadow. You have the darkest next to the brightest part, and that looks really good.
It's like a little recessed shade. Okay, but here's how I painted these things. I skipped priming. I went straight into base coating with khaki from Vallejo Game Color. And then I, what did I do next? I think I did all the shading and the highlighting on the white portion of the ship. I love the volumes on a Raider. They're so satisfying to paint with an airbrush.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so big and they're so gradual. And then from there, actually, you know what? I lied. Here's the problem. Okay. There's so much I want to say. What week 1 should have been if I were a smart hobbyist was I paint 1 Raider just to figure out where all the potential hangups are, And
get your steps, you're confident with each step.
Exactly. Instead of jumping into a new thing I've never painted before and doing all 5 at the same time. I base coated with khaki first, thinking that was smart, and I was like, wait a second. I don't want to have to mask off all the khaki to do the black. I should do the black first. Then I pivoted, did the black, airbrushed it all, and then masked it with masking putty and masking tape, which was as much of a bitch as you think it was. Trying to get around the back part specifically, like those like curved, like you can probably see where I mangled it with an X-Acto knife, which I'm gonna hide with like battle damage and chipping and stuff like that. But then I did the white stuff. I think actually before the black, I did the silver and the blue. I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But here's the worst thing, bro. When I finished the khaki and took the masking tape off, yeah, you know what happened.
I know what's happening.
It peeled like a motherfucker. And not on the ones I didn't prime. The one you're holding right now without any basing texture on it, there are 2 like that. Those ones didn't peel. The ones that peeled were the ones that I primed with Molotov 1 for All like 3 years ago.
No way.
Yeah, way. Totally. And I was blown away, and I was doing everything in my power to make that not happen. I weakened the tape by putting it on my apron before applying it to the model. Yep. I heated the tape before I took it off to reheat the adhesive on the tape. I was doing everything to prevent it from happening, and it did not matter. It took off. It was fucking carnage. It was absolute carnage. And so I fixed a lot of it with a paintbrush, and it looks pretty damn good. And some of the how like when you rip paint off, it leaves like a physical texture because it's like a little layers.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put some on my razor wing. I have silver chipping on the black part. I'll put some silver chipping.
Oh yeah,
on that texture.
That's purposeful.
It'll disappear. Yeah. You won't even see it. So I fixed that problem. We solved it. And then we kept going. I was painting on the weekend, trying to like catch up and make up time. And I'm timing this whole process about how many hours it takes to paint these 5 guys. But I mean, like, there are other things like where I put all these flags and trophy spears in the ship. And I'm like, why did I do that? These things should be separate, you know?
Yeah.
So I can airbrush them. I don't got to worry about masking any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So much of this ship should have been a sub-assembly that I just didn't think about until I started painting. And I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? I've made a gross error here. So I feel like I haven't gotten anywhere, and I feel like I'm so slow. And then, like, I need to just chill the fuck out and be like, it doesn't matter, you know? Like, I'm acting like the world is ending, like there's some kind of imminent goal and that I'm, like, failing. But I have, like, built into my schedule, like, opportunity for me to take longer on this stuff. And it's okay, you know? This next week, my only job is to paint my Archon. And so I can do that in 2 days easily, and then have 3 more days to work on these vehicles, you know? It's like...
In and of itself, because I have those moments too, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity for storytelling.
Sure.
This is an opportunity for me to, like, maybe that's the whole, maybe the hook or the really key point of the video is this relatable experience of hobbying and things not going exactly the way you want, and you're always learning something, and you're always finding, typically through mess ups, what's the better or worse way, and things take longer or whatever. And there's a reason why so few of us have full 2,000 painted armies, because things are not always as straightforward as they seem.
No.
And I think people appreciate hearing that. So I think, like, you going through it is like, okay, people will be like, okay, then you're kind of braced for impact for their own, like, curveballs thrown in their own hobby project.
That is definitely the messaging of video number 1 that's coming out, hopefully this Monday. And I'm really trying to have the video have a certain type of message, because, like, I think it could very easily go into this negative place. And I feel like negativity, the certain kind of negativity that I'm talking about, I don't think it works very well on YouTube, because maybe it implies some kind of, like, pity or something like that. Like, I'm not criticizing a third-party entity, like, not that kind of negativity. It's like, oh, woe is me, I'm failing kind of energy.
Right.
And I don't want it to be that. Like, I want to, my goal is to portray a realistic look at army painting, not like the process. Like, I'm fucking anal and insane. Like, I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm saying whatever you do, it'll take time.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know, it's okay to spend time to make your toy soldiers look like you want them to look like. Like, you gave me that idea of, like, having one thing looking good and everything else in the background not looking as good as that main thing. And that is a totally legitimate way to get this done. But after I made my schedule and it seemed reasonable, I was like, I can do this. You know, I can make them all look like what I want them to look like. And, like, that's the goal, you know?
You're painting 5 ships that are each the size of a Twinkie. Like,
It fucking is. You're right. Oh, my God.
roughly the same shape, too.
Yeah, Amber came in and she's like, those are big. And I was like, oh, God, if Amber can see it. I can't see it.
No. Yeah. And there's just a lot of little intricate bullshit.
There is. There's so much. But, man, it'll look so good when all 5 of these are done and just floating behind my infantry.
Absolutely.
I can see it, and it's like, it's super motivating me. So I'm this weird mixture of, like, excitable energy and, like, an anxious wreck, because I'm like, is this video going to be exciting if all I'm doing is airbrushing and fucking up? Is that a fun YouTube video? And I'm not editing it. Someone else is editing it. And so I'm, like, also doing this new experience of working with a remote editor, trying to get them footage on time. I actually had to overnight mail him a drive with all the footage on it, because it was taking forever to do this syncing thing that I do with my NAS. And so this is a lot of new experiences going on right now in my office, and I feel like I'm in 10 different areas at once: 3D printing, doing decals, base coding these ships for 10 goddamn million years, talking to 2 different editors.
There's a lot of
on.
balls in the air.
Yeah, you know, we had a meeting yesterday or 2
Yep.
days ago about TUP. I had a meeting with Magic Spoon. I had a meeting with Awada. You know, like, there's a lot going on.
Busy time.
Yeah,
But it feels like doesn't it kind of feel like it's almost always a busy time?
absolutely.
It's just what busy things you're working on
Absolutely.
change.
Absolutely, yeah. And I kind of feed off that hustle energy a little bit. Like I like it.
Yes.
I mentioned in the past, like I like that kind of like anxious like work energy. It's better than me not having direction and just kind of like
Yes.
languishing. So I feel like I just talked for like 30 minutes straight.
No. I like it. I have a couple of thoughts and or questions.
Last time you said that I'm would you call it like not an anxious painter, but a very like, what'd you say?
You have anxiety. That's for sure. I don't know. I said, but I know what you're talking about.
And I bet after hearing everything I just said, like that just makes you believe that thought even more, right?
Right. I'm like, dude, you just need to slap colors on your Eldar like me, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, but that process that I did for my Eldar is a lot harder. I don't say harder. It's a lot bigger hill to climb at scale for an army.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is scaling it up for an army is an interesting problem.
Yes. Because you are kind of sucking the joy that you get out of having that kind of freeing experience that's how it is anytime you paint an army. You are sucking the joy out of it to accomplish the goal at some point.
Right. Which is why I put the Archon after painting 5 vehicles.
That's true.
I want that little break.
You want that little reward of just focus on one guy and stuff. And that's really smart.
Yeah.
You hit on something that I think is vitally important that you learned, and that is that if you're doing multiples of one thing, you always do one all the way to completion, because that will speed up exponentially how much time the other 4 will take.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I think equally, or maybe even more important, you can look back to the finished product of the first one and feel that sense of accomplishment or sense of reinforcement that this will get to there. Because when you're doing all 5 and you don't know what there looks like, it makes you second guess and get more stressed out about each step. Is it the right approach or not?
And thirdly, it's better packaging for a video. If I finish a thing in the first one, that just feels better, It's like, okay, you get to see the vision, and now we're gonna multiply it,
Yes.
So it's all just like this bad decision making just comes from like trying to go too fast, Like, okay, I got a thing. The first idea that pops in my head, that's what I'm gonna go with. I'm just gonna go with it because I don't have a lot of time, And so that's the problem. I'm just rushing.
The next thing I wanted to talk about, and this may be a hot take or not a popular opinion, I think that masking is almost always the wrong decision.
Okay, so tell me, how do I accomplish what I accomplished here, this two-tone look without masking? So a nice blend from gray to black, nice blends from khaki to white without masking. Because I want to hear it, because I don't want to mask.
Okay, so if I was like looking at what you've done there, what I would have done differently, and I'm not saying that what I would do would be better looking at the end.
Okay.
But I think one of the things is we say with masking is that it's some form of like getting the result faster that you're looking for, right? Because by masking it off, I can then create that blend that if it wasn't masked, to get to that level would take me so much more time. But you're adding, you need to take into account how much time it takes to mask.
Absolutely.
And the variables for errors, which is like chipping. I never feel super confident that it's not gonna happen.
It's never happened to me.
Yeah. And you can do the same process 5 times, and 4 out of the 5 it'll work as expected, and the 5th it will be an utter fucking mess. Is there just like some other environmental variables or some bullshit we can't account for?
I'm never buying Molotov one for all color ever fucking again. Dude. That paint is dead to me.
I would have painted the black sails like I explained. I would have done the whole thing khaki, and then I would have gone with a brush and base coat it as smooth as I could, that black, and then just airbrush in the middle. The next thing I would have done is I use a sticky note oftentimes. So when you're talking about the silver front where you went from a silver to a black, I take a physical sticky note and I just I don't adhere it to anything. In one hand I'm holding the sticky note, in the other hand I'm holding the airbrush, and I kind of just make a physical barrier. And I just like stop it. And does it need to be 100% touches every single crisp line? Well, you can kind of fold that paper a little bit to go with grooves, but you just kind of put it up there and you just let her fly. And you can pull the sticky note back. You can pull your airbrush back and you see how it looks. Do you want to add more, whatever, put it back up, do it again. That is a kind of a form of masking, but it's about like sometimes it's just the speed and the immediate reaction to how it worked or didn't work. Maybe you're going to get a little bit of overspray with that. I think it's fairly minimum in my experience in doing it, but you keep moving quickly towards where you're trying to go. The other thing
where are you doing this on this vehicle?
Like that front part.
Not the shock prow, not the silver thing. You talking about the black nose?
The black, that black nose, I would just do that with a brush.
You would blend that black to that gray with a brush?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I did end up doing that anyways to solve the massive chipping that I caused. So I suppose that's a possibility.
There's also the sub-assembly thing. Like, okay, the whole undersection, you don't glue it together until you've just painted that black and then glue it together or something like that. Like,
that is definitely a time-saving thing for sure.
Right. But then you really need to understand, the makeup of the construction of the model, so putting it together, and what parts will need to be what. Like, you need that all figured out before you begin. And again, if it's like, well, if I painted one start to finish before I even had the other ones fully assembled, maybe then it will help me with the decision making of those four, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just go through and you have it fully built so you can play a game, and you're just going to paint it as you go, and you learn that there's some parts that are going to be more of a pain. They're going to take longer than I like in order for me to get where I want to get. And that's part of the shitty part of it.
Okay, so just to reiterate, you would hand paint the black parts instead of airbrushing them to skip the masking.
Yep.
And I guess that is absolutely a valid approach.
I know you're talking about smoothness, and I know mine wouldn't look as smooth, but I think on the tabletop you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Especially with weathering on it too.
Yeah.
But the thing is that even faster? It might be. It absolutely might be. But I airbrushed all 5 vehicles in like 45 minutes. But the masking took like 3 hours. So I didn't actually count it, but it took a long time, especially on this little back part.
Yeah.
5 of these motherfuckers. So that is absolutely a valid idea and worth experimenting with. Do you have any other ideas how I could save time?
I don't know, man.
That's fine.
It's I think that, not without like cheating.
What's cheating to you?
Cheating is not doing all the guys that are on.
Oh,
the
sure,
ship.
sure, yeah.
He's like, as if you're right. That they make the cool factor of that model, but that's like 25 dudes. That's like
25 dudes.
It's like over a full unit of 20. That's so many dudes.
So I was happy for a moment when I made that schedule, because I was like, I have 12 Cabalite warriors to paint, and I have 10 witches. I have 22 infantry to paint in my army, and then I'm done with infantry. And then this happened. That's over double. That's over fucking double of what I have left. And I was just like, okay, well,
this is really an example of the kind of a singular model that I think is wholeheartedly the most miserable kind of Warhammer model to paint. Because it's so hyper detailed, yet it's a vehicle, so you want the smoothness and the value that an airbrush can give.
Yeah.
But there are very distinct, sometimes even small areas that you're, for visual impact, creating drama through light next to dark, which I think is the way to do it.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you've got to find something that you're going to give up, and what you chose to give up
was time.
This
is my thing. I want a certain outcome.
Yeah.
And I want to do it as good as possible and as fast as possible. Does that mean that, relatively speaking, it is fast compared to someone else's approach to painting a raider? Can Jay paint a raider faster than this? 1,000%. Without a shadow of a doubt, he can. But I'd like to think that it wouldn't look this good. I'm not saying that I'm a better painter than Jay, but I'm hoping that the efforts that I'm making will result in a better looking vehicle for my army. That's the whole point.
Right.
Because I want pretty models, man.
Yeah, when you're all said and done, when you've got, look, I'm the first person that's going to admit that I am guilty of this, where I sacrificed quality for speed and quantity.
And that is totally valid.
Yeah. And my final, looking at my, Night Lord's army in the shelf, I'm like, they look cool when they're all together. At a distance, when I get up there, I'm like, that was a messy bitch, wasn't I?
But it's done.
But it's done.
Yeah. So you just need to assess for yourself what you want,
Yeah, and that's just
and I would like a pretty Dark Eldar army. Because if I was painting this without Jay, without thinking about him, I would just make a Dark Elder video every 2-3 months, and I'd paint one thing, and I'd paint it like really well. You know, I'd paint it like that Talos over there. You know, but you know, now I'm kind of pushing it a little bit, but I want to meet myself somewhere in the middle. Not amazing, but also still pretty good.
Yeah,
that's the whole goal.
Yeah, you set a certain quality level to your army, and if that quality is a B+, you never want to go lower than like a B- on any other part of the army.
Sure,
right?
Yeah. I didn't think about that.
Right. So you've created a certain bar, and you can go above that B+ for your Archon, and you can go
yes
below that B+ for whatever
the crew of these vehicles,
the ship.
Right? Yeah.
You can't go so far below.
Yeah, you can't go to no C-.
That it's obvious. Well, you can. There's no rules.
Right.
But innately, each of us as painters, whether we realize it or not, are going to feel that.
Yeah. You're going to feel some sense of like rules, like which don't exist, but the rules you make for yourself, essentially.
Okay. Well, this is a nice transition back to what I painted.
Yes.
Because for the first time since here, you can move this lady over here, and so you can pick that up. For the first time since I've started working on my Golden Demon project, I actually brought something physical for Scott to look at and hold in his hands. And so this is what I've been working on this week. It's the last, I'm telling myself, it is the last like major big section of the model. Once this is done, everything else is small things. Like I have to paint his tail, I have to paint his fingernails, I have to paint all the tiny little rats. I've got to finish his horns, but the horns are like 70% done. He's got little bojangles and bells on his horns and little belts. I've got to paint the thing that's on the top of his staff, but that's copper. But now I figured out my copper plan. And so diametrically opposed to the first thing I painted, and much more closely to the things that you painted, this is an utter slog.
Yes, join me in the slog, brother.
Of exactitudinous. So what I did was I gave myself a certain amount of time for each of these sections. So in his giant shoulder pad things, he's got chainmail, which is the first thing I painted. He's got the black metal shoulder pads, which are the second thing I painted. He's got the copper necklacey thing with the warp stones on it. That was the third thing I painted. And the last thing, which is obviously not done yet, is his red sash scarf. Mm-hmm. And so I worked my way through it, and I reminded this painting for a project like this is such a constant reminder that, like, because you're doing at least the way I'm approaching is each little section kind of start to 95% done. I always give myself a 5% that if I get time, once the model's all together and everything's whatever, find ways to improve and tweak. There's always ways for it to be better. You are constantly going through this cycle of doubt of, is this going to look good? Is this going to fit with everything else? You go through the shit phase 100 times in one project, and that just feels miserable. As to oppose how I like to paint now, it's like I try to pump through that shit phase and make it wild, so then when I pull it together at the end, it's like a fun birthday present to myself. And this is not that. So each of these sections, I had this scary moment of like, oh God. But when I get to the end of it, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling this pretty good about this. But then I immediately like start a new thing, and then I start second guessing the thing I thought looked good because this new thing right next to it now looks like shit. And so it's just this fucking nonstop shitstorm. But yeah, so that is where we at. That is 4 full days, 4.5 full days of painting.
Tell me what you're gonna do more on the maroon magenta scarf.
Well, you could see that there's a bunch of free-handed symbols that I then like brought in with some glazes over the top to make them feel faded. I haven't decided if I want to do some really faint like highlighting of those to reinforce that they're there. I don't know if that's how cloth would work. Maybe like stippling little highlights on that.
Yes. Can I make a suggestion?
Please do.
Okay. I think some of these look a little bit too much like you painted them on with a brush, and I think what would solve it instantaneously is if you just frayed some of the lines a little bit, added in some little dots that would make them look less like like I'm looking at this one specifically right now.
Yeah.
Like just like make those lines less perfect, give it a little bit of texture, like bring some of the color that is right below it like into the line to like chew out some, like, distress it a little bit, and then that'd be fucking banging. It'd be so banging.
Okay.
I love the faded freehand though. I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah. I am gonna come in and reinforce the red with glazes, in not overall over everything, but over a lot of it, especially in folds and stuff. I want to bring back a bit more vibrancy to a pure red, more of like a Mephiston red, maybe not quite that bright because I'm using a burnt red. It was like kind of a wet blended base coat for everything. So I'm going to do that to bring back some of the reds, and I'm going to do more. I got to build up more of the texture work with the frayed kind of khaki colors, boost that a little bit higher, maybe reinforce some of the darker dark brown, scorched brown color shadows a little bit, but not a ton because it isn't, a super voluminous surface, so it shouldn't get super dark. And then it's refinement of texturing up those final details and figuring out if I'm going to how I'm going to approach those freehands a little bit.
Yeah, some things that I love this super dark shadow right here. Mm-hmm. I love in the sculpt how it follows the shoulder armor really well, but then also you reinforce that idea so well with this like hardcore shadow, and then it comes back to this mid-tone. And you mentioned you use khaki on this?
Yeah.
The khaki looks so fucking good as a highlight color with this color, and it's got me thinking about where else you could use khaki to like give this like really like sun bleached kind of faded look. It looks so good.
Yeah, I was thinking there are some parts, even because it's kind of a bland, that whole thing that falls down, and some of the there's 3 different colors of those freehand symbols that kind of overlap a little bit, but kind of cover the whole space. And some of, especially the darkest ones, are mostly faded. It's like, well, are they faded too much? But if you had them too opaque, then they just look like you painted them on the top. Mm-hmm. So. Again, I've never done that before, so it's kind of a learning process and feeling like after I did that, spent hours freehand painting on all these symbols and looking up Skaven symbols and putting them all on there. They look like utter trash because they were like...
I was going to ask you, how did you feel while you were doing
it? Horrible.
Yes.
It was just horrible. And after putting some more glazes over the top of everything to pull them in a little bit, I felt better. I still don't feel 100%, but also I'm like, but now they're some of them feel kind of gone. So do I do a little bit of that texturing or whatever to kind of with a color that's more of into the highlight of what that symbol's color would be without making it too like pushing it over the top again? I don't know the answer. It's one of those things. This is how I paint for Golden Demon. I stress the fuck out because I don't know how it's going to end up looking at the end, and I hate it.
I think you created more work for yourself, like a lot more work for yourself. But if you nail it, I think it'll be way better than if you hadn't have done it.
Yeah,
right.
I was to a point before I mixed the colors and started fucking freehanding symbols on there. I'm like, this looks pretty good. It's just the wet blended base. I could just do that, and then I'm like, that's so fucking safe. And some points of a project, it's smart to be safe because they're not necessary to be a key, interesting focal point. But I feel like this is one of the features of the model that should be, so I can't be safe there.
Yeah. This detail, I used to go to a Lutheran church when I was a little kid. And this detail reminds me of this exact kind of thing that pastors in those churches would wear.
Yep.
And they changed the symbology based on the season of the church, and typically it's only like a symbol that's like down here in the lower quarter, and so it'd kind of been interesting to like maybe like paint this patch like a different color and put like a prominent symbol there, and maybe like over here a little bit instead of going all over and creating more work for yourself. But I don't think either of those approaches is a bad approach. But like if I were doing something new for the first time on this beautiful shawl that I had just got done blending on, I might have picked something a little bit less like invested.
Yeah, you're right. I like that thought too, because I remember when I got like confirmed because it was also Lutheran that we had those things, and you had like your Bible verse on the thing. Yeah. You just have it say like Matthew 13 or something on the side of it. It's within the Skaven lore, guys. Come on.
I think it looks awesome. I love the little ram rat on the side here. He's got ram horns.
He's pissed.
It's like a little black Phillip mouse or rat.
I think the thing I'm most like happy about of all the things on there is how the copper turned out.
Yeah, I think that looks great. It really pops. It really pops.
And I went with my contrast paint approach to the warp stones that I figured out when I painted my army, and I kind of just did it to a higher level. But I'm like, I need those kind of screaming green. You know, warp stones shouldn't be wimpy, right?
Yeah. And it isn't.
So that's
cool. Making progress.
And I get this done, I will feel kind of close.
Okay. This is a new podcast format. I think we're into the main topic, right?
Well, we do have a few little preamble.
Oh no, yeah, we have things. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we have a thing after this thing before the topic too.
We do?
That's okay. We have the Patreon mini critique.
Oh right. Okay. All right. So now, with our hobby update out of the way, we're gonna get into more general like hobby news, hobby stuff that's going on in our life, maybe some off-topic stuff. So let's get into it with maybe something of a sad comment here. Danilo Cartacci, not this past year, but the year prior, the winner of Best in Show at Monte Sansevino and probably tons of other awards. He has like a set with Chimera and stuff like that. He passed away. I think he was not that old. And so it's kind of sad to see that, and the painting community was definitely like feeling that loss and talking about it a lot online. I just wanted to mention it here. Great painter. He's actually one of the historical painters have a vibe, like the way they paint. You can see it at Monte. They all kind of look similar. But when you see Danilo's like that Best in Show winning piece, it feels like a fantasy painted thing, but like done through the lens of an historical painter. So he had like this beautiful hybrid style of painting that was amazing to see, and I bet what set him apart at shows like that to win those kinds of awards. So sad to see him go.
Yeah. That's it is really sad news. And seeing any of his paint jobs, if you haven't gone out there and looked at his paint jobs before, I encourage you to do that. If you don't know, his last name is spelled Cartocci. Really a key person in pushing through boundaries in his own way in our hobby, so he will be missed. Mm-hmm. An easy transition to that is to talk about Burger King smells. So, for those of you that didn't catch the last episode, I talked about the Burger King smell. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Every time you drive by a Burger King, walk by a Burger King, it has a smell, and it smells like heaven. I assume the gates of heaven smell like that.
They smell like flame broil, baby.
Flame broil. And I was a little suspicious about that smell. It's so consistent. It's so amazing. And I had heard some whispers on the internet years ago that they pump that smell through their ventilation system.
Yeah, that they were waging chemical warfare on Americans.
Yes. Luckily, one of you goody peepees reached out in the comments section, and they said that they worked at Burger King for 7 years.
Yes, behind the scenes.
Yes, this is why we are stronger together.
This is why we make a podcast.
Right.
Is to figure these kinds of things out.
Yeah. And he said that the reason why there's that smell is that all the broilers are directly under the large ventilation, air-sucking sections in the kitchen. Because if they didn't do that, you would cook the cooks alive.
He was like, they would die. Yeah. It'd be like 130 in there.
Yeah. So whenever they're broiling stuff, all those fumes get pumped straight out. So we now know the answer. He's like, it's the real smell, baby. I mean,
you're welcome, internet.
Yeah, now we know, and now you know, and you can sleep soundly tonight. He also said, an interesting side note, that one of the things about working at Burger King, he's like, I was surprised at how few like strange and like chemically ingredients are brought into them, brought into the restaurant. Like everything was like, it was food. It was real food. It was like, lettuce was lettuce, and you know, that kind of things. And it's like, other than the mayo, he said the mayo was a little bit sus. But outside of that, so I'm like, hey, look at this. We got BK points. We're earning BK points.
Anyways, time to get into our BK ad. No, he also said that if you go to any BK in the United States and you say that you're a fan of the TUP podcast, you'll get 10% off.
I'm sure that'll work.
All right. Other things.
We won a podcast award, Scott.
I saw that email. It just seems like some hokey little random site. I don't know if it's anything actually good.
The way that I look at this, and I could be completely wrong, but when I worked in the business world, what local chambers of commerce would do, as well as other like random kinds of business development companies would do, is they would have these award things where they would award local businesses. Oh, you are the Chinese restaurant of the year. Now, if you want to do, now, congratulations on winning Chinese Restaurant of the Year, Scott. If you want, we can get you a package, right? And that package will be signage for you to put on your restaurant. We can do a package that'll have advertisements and local things or blah, 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 for marketing to tell everyone how amazing your Chinese restaurant is, Scott.
Okay.
Here's what that looks like.
Okay.
I'm totally not giving you this award so you'll spend money to advertise the fact that I gave you the award, right?
Okay. It's some third party that has some kind of sway, maybe some kind of importance.
And I am not saying that is exactly what this is. It's FeedSpot is the name of...
Ah, yes, FeedSpot.
FeedSpot.
We're number 1, baby! 20 best hobby podcasts.
Yes, of the 20 best hobby podcasts in the entire world, we are number 1.
Now, who are we crushing here? Number 2 is So Very Wrong About Games. Number 3 is Look Out, Sir, a Warhammer 40K podcast. Punchboard Paradise, and it just goes on and on and on.
And this is all hobbies. There's like the Tap Craft, the podcast is about like crafting your own beers. Dude, there's one about...
There's a Star Wars one in here. Dude, of all hobby podcasts, global, we're number 1. Wow.
I don't know. The AMA podcast.
It's just a podcast about doing Ask Me Anythings.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so take it what it is. There's a Star Wars one that talks about vintage Star Wars toys.
Oh yeah, baby.
So take that for what it will. I also wonder if they like switch the order so every single person that they give an award to, they show up at number 1.
Oh, actually, look at the link. Does it have some kind of special? I can't see it on the phone.
Top name.
Yeah, I'd be curious if it had some kind of special year on it. Apple rating 4.9 out of 5. Goody peepees. You shouldn't have. It's not like I ask you to give us a 5 out of 5 at the end of every single episode.
Thank you for those that do.
Yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, the website itself, if I just like went to its homepage, I don't know what's going on here.
Also, it says Instagram 85.7. We don't have an Instagram. Is that your or my Instagram 85.7?
I don't have 85. I have like 70 or something.
I have 85.6. Okay, it must be
just using yours.
Okay.
Anyway,
we're winners.
We're winners, and that's all that matters.
Really? Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I did have a little discussion about RPG Corner.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, you want to talk RPG Corner?
I just did a session yesterday.
Okay, because Danimal was telling me he was going to be here last night. So let's hear you playing some Star Wars RPG. What's the full name of this game?
Force and Destiny.
Force and/or Destiny.
And/or Destiny, yeah. There may not be much Destiny. But we had finished the one campaign in the back of the rulebook, and Dan expressed interest in doing a little sidebar, maybe 2-session mission in between starting our next little campaign that might be like 8 or 10 sessions long. And I was like, absolutely, if I can get in there. It also gives me an opportunity to make him play a character, which I was very excited about. And so he got to be DM. I started out for like 15 minutes in the beginning, and then we swapped as my character came in to play. And I would love to give some props to Dan. He is just such a prepared person. He wants to do, we didn't get to it yet, but he wants to do a ship combat type of situation. And so he developed this hybrid rule set of X-Wing First Edition and some of the roleplay elements of Force and Destiny so they could come together to be a small mini game. So when we do get to the ship combat portion, we'll be able to use those rules. He made a cheat sheet for all of us that we could all print out. He brought the ships. He brought the X-Wing battle mat. And it was cool because basically we were robbing ships from a derelict space yard. And so he had the models of the ships that were operable so we could pick them. It was very visual. And so he was hella prepared. And the one area of critique, and I've already told him this, he's just too nice, you know? Like, the cool thing about Force and Destiny is that it has this very dice system where you can fail, but with a downside. You can succeed, you can fail with an upside, or you can succeed with a downside, and everything in between those options. And so we would fail rolls, like, straight up. But he would, like, still give us the goods, you know? It's like, you know, I think failure is an important part of the storytelling, but it's also one of the hardest things to do. It's like, how do you interpret these dice to give an interesting outcome such that the players feel intrigued, they want to keep engaging, they don't feel defeated. There's so many ways you can mess that up. And so his default was just to be a good guy, you know, be a nice guy to the players, but I want more failure, you know?
Yeah, that's called failing forward.
Right.
So you, and a pure failure can still be a pure failure as long as you've given some kind of direction, or the environment, the scene that you're in changes because of your failure. So you feel like you have direction. You know, a bad failure is like, yes, you failed to kick open the door, and then you don't say anything else. Okay, well, you've not given me any new changes in the environment. I don't know what to do from here. I guess I try to kick open the door again. You say, you smash your foot into the door, you hear your ankle crack, and you scream, and then you hear shouting from behind the door as someone heard you try to smash it open and failed to do so.
Yeah.
Now the situation has changed.
Yes.
We can see how failure maybe had some negative impact.
Yes.
But you still know now with these new variables what new options you can think of based on where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
and
so.
it's such a skill. Also, Dan, he played as the NPCs that we interacted with in the small little town we were in, and he was fucking convincing. He put out a voice, and it was like, where'd this come from?
Oh, dude,
I was truly shocked, actually. I was shocked and impressed at the same time about how good he was at mimicking this particular character that he introduced us to.
Oh, me to sell you parts.
Yeah, he was the Gungan. Yeah. He was,
the Gungan.
it was cool, and he put his own flair in it. He's a huge fan of the Clone Wars and that era, and so he put some of that in the campaign as well.
Oof, jeez.
So I love it.
Speaking of failing,
Tom, wait, are you shitting on the prequels right now?
ugh.
Hey, the new thing to hate is on the sequels. Okay, the prequels are cool now. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we have a thing that's even worse than them.
Oh, right.
The sequel movies.
I don't know if there's a lot worse than Baby Anakin.
Are you telling me you don't want to hear about the Trade Federation? And okay, anyways. That was my RPG experience. Great job, Dan. Loved it.
Okay. Yeah. We've still been playing mine, but actually the thing I wanted to bring up real quickly in RPG Corner is I actually got turned on to a different podcast. It's kind of a let's play podcast, but it's by a comedy troupe. And it's three brothers and their dad. And this podcast is actually, it's 69 episodes long of them playing D&D, and it came out in 2014, so it's over 10 years old.
Did they stop at 69?
I don't know.
They must have, dude, those motherfuckers.
Yeah. But it's called The Adventure Zone, and any of you that are RPG players out there maybe like it. And actually, if you're not even like a D&D RPG player, it's just because they're so entertaining and it's so fun, and it's not rules heavy. It's not about, because when they start, they're almost all D&D virgins, and those that have played some, it's very little experience, and it was a constant reminder for me about what really makes RPGs tick and what makes them so unique and so much fun. And it's really the group storytelling aspect and the painting an interesting picture so your players feel like they're there and can react in fun ways. It's really rules light on here's the actions you can take, and here's what you should be doing and casting this spell and doing this, and open to just what would my character do in this weird situation? Is it the most obvious? It is the most within the rules? No, but it's using the rules as a backdrop to figure out success and failure, but just having fun. They also play it virtually, and they don't use minis, obviously, and they're not sitting around the same table. And I have long had this argument with Vince about playing the game with miniatures, and we always play with miniatures, and he does not, which is weird, as Vince paints more miniatures than anyone alive. But this podcast really just kind of reminded me that, like, of the downsides of playing with miniatures, and it's a subconscious thing, because as soon as you put down a grid and as soon as you have little miniatures on the board, your brain, you do not realize this happens, but your brain immediately narrows its focus.
Yep.
You're not listening, you're now looking. You're closing your ears and you're opening your eyes, and you're looking at your sheet for abilities and for techniques and for skills and whatever, and you make it a video game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. It becomes more like a board game, and so you engage your board game mind, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And this was just like, oh, fuck, Vince was right. God damn it. I'm not saying, I think there's probably some kind of middle ground here, but what this made me want to do was to play without miniatures and just everyone, like, we're just soaking in and smelling the grass and feeling the environment and reacting without exactitude. Because you're then like, okay, this character is exactly 6 squares from me, and that one is 8 squares from me, and my spell range is blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, you see 4 orcs running towards you. One of them's in front, and they look like the leader, and they've got 2 big battle axes, one in each hand, and the guys are flanking him as they're all running towards you. I don't need to know the specifics. I know the situation. I can hear their grunting. I can figure out. I don't need exactitude. And it reminded me about one of the games that I really like to run. It's called Kids on Bikes. It's kind of a 80s. It's Goonies, the video game. It's Stranger Things. It's I always run it as a one-shot. I like to do it at conventions when we can get people together to play, and we never play with miniatures. It's super rules light. I don't expect anyone to know the rules. In fact, I don't care. I would rather you not know the rules when we play this game, because then I will get that part figured out when you tell me what you want to do. And it's so much fun because it is truly like we tell a wild story over 3 to 4 hours. And it's not about the mechanics of the game. Because any RPG, the mechanics are just there as for something you to lean on. They're the bumpers in the bowling alley. But it doesn't matter what the bumpers are. You're still rolling the ball down the center to hit the pins. And the pins are the fun. That's the whole point. And so, anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. It's called Adventure Zone. You can find it on all podcast locales. But their podcast like network thing is a little bit confusing, so I think if you like look up Adventure Zone Balance, I think that's where you'd find it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how you say you would play that game without teaching people the rules or without them knowing it. And I think like everything that you teach someone about an RPG is like an opportunity to like narrow their potential creativity.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, it's helpful to have direction. So,
Right.
But it's like you need to find this middle ground, and maybe it also depends on like what kind of person you are. Like if you're an experienced RPG player, you don't need to know the rules necessarily, like because you know that okay, I'm just trying to really live in this world as much as humanly possible, like my character would. But if you are like a beginner, who maybe approaches it more like a game, it can be helpful to have like some of those like options to guide you through what you should be doing. But yeah, the more you put the rules on, the more it feels like a game, and the more the creativity narrows.
You're right.
It's interesting. It's really interesting.
And it's not unlike miniature war games in a similar route in that the more you become an expert in the rules, the more you can see what things are advantageous for you to do and not do.
And that's not the point.
Yeah, that's not especially in a cooperative game. There's a difference between a war game where you and I are playing against each other and me understanding the intricacies of chaining out this unit to prevent you from getting in close to my hero. That's a strategical advantage that the rules are accounting for, and I'm taking advantage of how the rules work. In a cooperative RPG, you may find that the best use of my barbarian's turn every turn is to do X. And X is usually run up and smash the thing in the face. The game becomes lame if that's all you do every time, even though by the rules, strategically, that's probably the smart thing to do. It's also not the interesting thing to do. It also doesn't make the story fresh and open up this weird new situation that you found yourself in because you decided to swing by the the chain that was hanging across the dungeon thing and try to jump into the cage where the guy was held and opening the door so then the wolf comes out and see what the wolf does. Well, maybe the wolf's going to attack you, so that wasn't the smart thing to do, but you've made a new situation all because of just creative things. And I think the more you are an expert in the rules, the harder it is for you to not see the optimal line and just pick the optimal line.
Yep. At some point, I want to make a video about this, like how I went from not hating, but having zero interest in RPGs to really, really enjoying them and like seeing myself playing in a bunch of different ones. And it was just a mind frame switch. That's all it was. Like nothing about RPGs has changed. You know, they're all as great as they've always been. It was something that changed in me, and I feel like if I can like help anyone else who is in a similar boat as I was before, like make the switch and just enjoy something where you didn't enjoy it before. It just makes the world a more fun place, right?
Absolutely.
I want to make a video like that at some point.
I won't be like that. All right, let's transition over to another curveball we're throwing the audience today, which is we are going to do a miniature painting critique. Now, our patrons can submit their minis for critique, and we work our way through that list, and we do these live. So we haven't done some deep dives on these prior, so it's going to be our gut reactions, immediate things that we see that we are going to try to give feedback for and maybe help you improve or reinforce the things that you're doing right. This section used to be in the after party part of the podcast, and we thought it'd be more valuable that everyone can hear a quick mini painting critique, and you can use some of the things that we talk about maybe in your own miniature painting. Also, if you wanted to have your mini looked at and critiqued from us, you can consider joining the Patreon. We've got the link down in the show notes in the video description. So if you're interested in that, if you get any value out of the show, that really goes a long way to help support us and continue to win awards. So, and fear not, patrons. We have other things that we talk about in the after party that take the place of this. So there's other great things. So if you are a patron, you get access to the after party, which is an extended version of the podcast. We usually talk about this at the very end of the podcast, but we're doing it earlier now, so maybe more people will hear it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is 100% the reason why we're doing it. But also, it's just fun. It's fun to see your model in the show that goes up on YouTube and in our podcast areas, and to hear about it. It's cool to see that and not to have it locked behind the door, you know. So I think this is a really fun change, one of the changes to our format. So Goody PP All-Star Scuba Steve. He's given us kind of it looks like a Dark Souls boss. I don't know if it is, but it's a big armored dude. His torso has a bunch of like screaming souls in it, and his head is, I don't even know what happened to his head.
I don't know what that is, actually.
Yeah,
maybe that's a point we discussed. But, it looks like a board game mini it's called Goliath, he titled it on the Imager file. But painted in a very grimdark style. It looks like it's going to be a big model. Like it's probably twice as big as your average hero for the game, mostly covered in this really intricate golden armor.
Yeah.
And really kind of gnarly sculpt. And his paint job really leaned into that gnarliness of the sculpt, and I think that's one thing I immediately see that Scuba Steve did well here.
Yes. I feel like in terms of the scheme, he has a desaturated red, he has this kind of a bronzy gold color, and then the torso and the head is this like ashen black, but with this lovely like teal blue like spot color. And I think this draws a lot of great attention to the center mass of the model. Which is important because it's this cold stuff surrounded by all this warm stuff. So first of all, Scuba Steve, I think that was a good play.
Good play, indeed. Also, great job of like leaning into this grimdark, gritty, dirty aesthetic. You have dirty metals everywhere, and whether that was with an oil wash, with a series of shade paints, or however you accomplished this, I'm guessing it was some form of washing because there's a lot of little fiddly details in all these armor panels. And that would be no fun at all. Try to paint every one of those with a brush, but you got in there and got all the grit and grime on there, and there's just enough of that like gold color showing pure on some edges with the shine that it defines the shapes really well. But that kind of a piece where the large percentage of this metal model is kind of uniformly grimy and not attention grabbing, you need some point of the model to then be the attention grabbing part.
Yeah, all right, Scuba Steve. No more fun and games.
Yeah, this is it. Now we're going to shit all over it.
Okay, my first point of feedback is I think the maroon color is a little bit too dark and a little bit too desaturated. I think you can go a little bit brighter, a little bit more colorful with it, and you would still 100% have the vibe you're going for, but it would also feel like a distinct part of the model. So like what I'm looking at right now is photo left, his hip. That maroon color is almost the same kind of brown as some of these gold panels. You know, it's so close in hue. And so I think a little bit of extra highlighting, a little bit of extra saturation would differentiate it, but still give you this kind of grim, dark palette.
And if I was painting this model, I would probably, exactly to the point that you've painted it, Steve, I would have then done probably what I'm doing with my Skaven robes. I would mix in a light khaki to that base red. And so you can really bring some attention to the lines, to the frayed edges, to differentiate it from warm of a similar value as the gold, and push it with a little bit more details and have it accentuate without entirely losing that red feel.
And if some of the detail is a little kind of grimy and hard to really like figure out, like you should work with it. Like you should apply the highlights in a textured, stippled fashion. Don't go for smoothness. Oftentimes with 3D prints or board game models that lack sufficient detail to really last several layers of paint, just doing texture is really helpful to hide that detail that you can't see anyways, but also just to further emphasize this kind of crazy looking guy, you know?
Yeah. Lean into the scratchiness and the nastiness and dots and scratches. All right. My main issue with this model, Steve, is that the blue is, you're on the right track. It's not enough.
Yes.
His whole belly is mostly black here with just that blue peeking in from the most deepest recesses. And I think those, like, there's like faces and stuff pushing out of his stomach, or you have the eye holes and mouths light blue, but you almost want like some of that blue in a darker section to define these shapes better. There's a lot of smaller shapes here and they have no definition. And you could even go up to almost as bright blue as you have on those interior sections, and then put those up to almost white. Then you can push it even further, but you need to have some more of that blue around those kind of faces pushing through to really define those shapes and help clarify what we're looking at. It's hard for me to determine what I'm looking at right here.
100%. You have two areas on the model that have this teal color, and I feel like you need one more area to give this nice little triangle feeling. And I think the area I'd put it is photo right, maybe on his hand, on his shoulder pad, or something like that to kind of give us this triangle of blue details to really go from the lower element to the second high element to his face. And then furthermore, I think the black portion of his torso and his head is too subdivided. It's a one whole area, and it doesn't mingle at all with the gold. And to fix that, he has this lovely lock on his like chest and neck, and also this chain that runs across. I think that should be painted in this brassy gold color, because that would then reintegrate this part of the model with the rest of the scheme, and it wouldn't make it feel so much like I have my brass part and my black part, and they do not coexist. I want them to coexist a little bit more, so I think just small details painted in this black area, that same gold, would make them marry together better.
Yeah. And I think probably the brightest point of this model, where your eye is drawn the most, should probably be that weird mouth face thing.
Yeah, what is that?
It looks like it's like growing out of his neck, and it's like the neck part is torn from that locket, and there's some big gnarly teeth. So it actually have the brightest points be the mouth behind the teeth, to define that almost a pure white behind those teeth, and then you can edge highlight each of the individual teeth to add some more depth and dimension to see what you're looking at. But that should be the singular brightest point of the model, and right now it's not. So just kind of some little things, but I think, overall, this feel of this model and the environment and the nastiness of what kind of game this is, you certainly have the that on lock, dude. So
My one last piece of feedback, I want to see some stipply bright edge highlights on so many of these armor panels have beautiful edges, and the ones on his thighs, the edges look really muddy and they don't have a lot of definition. This would help to give more definition to the model. It would give you more of that like worn and beaten armor feel, and it would just help with visual clarity on the miniature. Just some very sparing little dotty edge highlights on the myriad of armor panels that is on this dude.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Scuba Steve, for bringing in a model for us to look at. Well done. And again, if you wanted to have your model shit upon by us, you can put those. There's a place to submit them right on the Patreon for us. All right, Scott. We're moving on to the main topic.
Let's do it.
We just looked at, right before recording here, when our first Trapped Under Plastic podcast went live, and it was the 23rd of September, 2019. And we had the deafening roar. Was that our the prequel?
That was the test. Yeah, to see, does this work? Is this a good idea? Do people like this?
Yeah, and we did like 2 or 3 episodes of
and we had amazing topics for those first 3 episodes. Like I remember that one of those. I think the second thumbnail was like, I'm fantasy racist or something like that, which is like such a funny thing. And then the other one was like talking about recasting, like a really interesting, like, hot button issue in our hobby. So those were good episodes for sure.
Yeah, we wanted to be really hot and bothered right out of the gate with really hot button issues.
We did, yeah.
And now we just talk about Burger King smells. So
and ducks.
And ducks, yes, and of course tendies and Fireball. But so let's talk about. First of all, you already have felt a little bit of what this main topic is about, and the tweaks you've seen in the intro to this episode, where we're playing a bit with our formatting of going forward, how we're looking to improve the podcast. And there was kind of a pivotal thing that just happened a few days ago, Scott. You want to talk about that has kind of led us down this road of where we're at.
Yeah, we got first place in the Emmys of podcasts.
Yeah. We got our Oscars are on the way. They're in the mail.
Are you talking about the meeting? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You don't have to start there, but that's kind of where I am.
Well, where does it start though?
I don't even know.
Okay.
This is what award-winning podcasting sounds like.
Me and John went and had lunch at Arby's, and we sat down and we discussed things about the podcast that we liked and we didn't like what was going well, what wasn't going well. And at the end of that discussion, we decided that we need to have a monthly time where we meet during the workday just to talk about the podcast, talk about maybe how the previous episodes are doing, talk about the new ideas for the future 2 that we're going to do, or possibly more, for the next coming month, and to talk about other areas of improvement that we want the podcast to go in, whether that's like financial like success for us so that we can like do more and impressive things, hire more people to help us, because we don't have a lot of time outside of our own YouTube channels to really invest in this, but we want to invest more in it. Yeah. And so we scheduled that meeting. We had our first meeting, and we decided that we want to try to play around with the format of the episode a little bit to really like capture the kind of audience member that we're looking for, while also not messing with the magic sauce that is the current episode format, right?
Yes.
We want to do both things.
Right. Yeah, so there's always room for improvement, and I mean, as any business, this podcast has been going for over 5 years, close to 5.5 years now. We probably should have had a monthly business meeting from the beginning. Whoops. And I think a big part of why that wasn't a thing that we historically had done was I think we were much more proactive, especially probably the first 1 to 2 years, of discussing these things before we started recording. We got together in between recordings, just over chat channels. After we recorded, we'd sit and we'd have lunch, and we'd just basically talk business the whole time about the podcast, about what worked, about tweaks we want to make, about all these kinds of things. And over time, that kind of faded away. Mm-hmm. And we're both guilty of it. And we're both, as we learned about from Scott's Deldar work here, like, always in this world of frantic do the next thing, put out the next video, start
Go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because of that, the podcast, where we've seen it do for the small hobby that we're in, do pretty well without requiring us to spend a ton of hours on the business side of things outside of it. And so we just kind of got lazy. And not because we don't care about it, because we very much do. We're just like, well, it's doing fine on its own. We don't need to do more for it. We need that time for our own channels to get our work done and get a video out on time and this, that, and the other. And that's not healthy long term for this podcast. And it's also not healthy, I don't think, long term for Scott and I's partnership in this, that we don't have good open communication lines. So if one of us is frustrated with something, upset with something, not happy with how things are, we've got a place, and we know those communication lines are open with a regular conversation. And what I feel like, even after that very first meeting, is that we're now a little bit more in tune and probably more likely to bring up things outside of those meetings based off of feeling positive momentum that we've got from having a structured, planned meeting minutes, post-meeting actions and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the thing I really want to emphasize about what we're talking about right now is we're really not trying to forget about what makes this podcast special. I know when YouTubers discuss this kind of thing, like the immediate reaction you have as a listener, I have this reaction too, is that they're going to change the thing that I like. And John and I think, have identified that the podcast listeners that we have are people that are first and foremost interested in our YouTube channel. And then probably secondly are interested in the hobby of miniature painting, which is probably pretty obvious. And so we want to make the podcast for that person as best as humanly possible. And we also want to be smart about it as well. So we're not like removing the Preamble Ramble from the episode, but we probably shouldn't open with Burger King smells if we're trying to attract miniature painters who maybe discovered the podcast for the first time and don't know who we are, So it's like, it's that simple kind of optimization that just never would have happened before unless we just had an opportunity to sit down and be like, maybe this is a good idea. And it's like, yeah, it kind of is a good idea.
It kind of is a good idea.
Or like John had the idea of like, why don't we put the Patreon highlight in the main episode so we can talk about it naturally in that section of the podcast, like not at the end. It's like, duh. Like, obviously we should be doing that. And again, that happens because we give ourselves the space to discuss these types of things. But we're really cognizant of the fact that we don't want to make it feel alien to people who have enjoyed it for these last 5 years. And so we rely on your feedback. So in the comments on YouTube, we'd love to hear what you think of this, maybe in ways that it can change to make it more enjoyable for you if you're an avid listener. We want to hear those things. We read them. Actually, part of the meeting is me reading some of the comments on the past episodes. So that is definitely a thing that is going to happen regularly. So
yeah, we want to learn from you. But I mean, also, we want this to be an easier on-ramp for new listeners.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the goals. But also, what we enjoy most of the podcast and what we get comments the most on when we're at conventions or even in the comment section and stuff is not about the specific Dark Eldar Scott was painting.
Mm-hmm.
It's about Burger King smells and ducks and fart jokes.
Yeah. And Gogurt.
And dude, we're shotgunning Gogurts, baby.
No, we're not.
Dude. Drew told me he's going to see bringing Gogurts to Adepticon.
Springing Gogurt?
He's bringing Gogurts.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to spring them on
He's going to spring them. Oh, my God.
We're going to get in so much trouble by, staining all the carpets
We're gonna
on the stage.
vomit on the carpet.
It's going to smell like delicious strawberry Gogurt all over whatever room we're in by the time we're done.
Oh, my gosh.
So, that's who we are. That is what we like. This is the jokes and the just having fun here. And we realize that if we took that away, we wouldn't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, that'd be kind of like the soul of it,
Yeah, and so I want to reinforce that that's not going anywhere. That is just, it's going to be natural part of our conversations. Go to those weird places anyway, and we're not going to stop them. So
you can't stop this man anyways. Yeah.
No.
My wife tried to. She said she had one preamble ramble topic an episode. He couldn't even commit to that, you know?
Well,
he's a force of nature.
The one just transitions to two or three. I can't help it. So when we first started this, we were back in your basement, in your house, wedged in the corner. And I kind of like looked back at some of our early topics and the kinds of things that we discussed. And I think I was expecting to see a big change between then and now. And I think we've gotten a little bit more, like over time, doing it so many times, we've gotten fine-tuned in like what is the order of a show and feeling like comfortable in certain sections and digging into things, which has meant the podcast length
has doubled
since that first year. And that's an interesting, eye-opening thing. And I didn't realize that at all until this was like months ago. You said that, and I was like, what? Sure enough, we've gotten a lot longer. And which, that's a data point that we have discussed for ways that we can look at growth or changes or improvements or ways to look at the podcast in a different way. I am not saying the podcast is going to be shorter, at least not now. We may have a different solution in the future, but I don't want to dig into that too much longer right now. But know that those are the kinds of things we're looking at. And also, one thing we are asking ourselves as we go through these meetings and we're talking about different things is we don't ever want to feel that we are taking anything away from you, the listener and viewer. And so when we're like, yeah, let's put the Patreon mini critique in the episode. Well, that means there's one less thing in the after party. Okay, we don't want to take anything away from the goody peepees that join us in the after party. So what can we put in there instead to have more fun? Maybe a little bit more things that are off the wall that we are gonna to give there. So note that as we move forward, we're trying to look at things at all angles, and again, we're trying to find your feedback in what you think works and doesn't work, so that'll help us and make decisions.
Yeah. So I guess we thought about like the kind of person who would be a patron of the show is probably the kind of person that just wants more of what the podcast does well already, which is like just, giving you a behind the scenes look into our hobby and also our friendship and our relationship. And I feel like the new segment that we call the After Party Warm Up is just more of that stuff. It's like, it's interesting to think about how previously the after party, like all three segments, were all just like down to business hobby stuff.
Yeah.
Which, like, if you think about it, that would make sense in the actual show where we're going for hobbyists as new listeners as well as people who like our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And so
we're keeping some hobbyist stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 2 out of the 3 segments are going to stay in the extended portion, but there's this one new thing that, is akin to the Preamble Ramble, but just like more of that goodness. And so, yeah, I think it's really easy to kind of like get in over your head with YouTube and just to do things the same way you've been doing them forever because it's simple, but also to really not think about who the consumer is of your thing and you just like go with your gut. It's like, so it's important, as I think we're both learning more about like how to be good content creators and like what makes a listener truly like engaged and interested in your stuff. I think it's important to kind of make these changes just to improve the whole product, and make it better for everyone and hopefully grow the show so it can be even more successful.
Yes. What we found out in looking back in the history of the podcast that I think that we learned that wasn't successful, at least for us, and that was when we did a virtual podcast. Remember doing it virtually?
Yeah,
we did because it was with COVID and
it's like 3 of them or 2 of them.
I think it was 2, but it felt like
10.
It felt like 10. And I know there's a lot of podcasts out there that do virtual. And there's a different art to that. I think, and I think it's I believe that you can get better at that
Definitely.
virtual experience, and we're not. Even though like in my previous life, I did so many of my meetings at work and stuff were virtual meetings and stuff. But there's a difference between talking to somebody, or a whole group in a meeting virtually, than like creating a thing that you want other people to listen to. Ain't nobody at my work was listening to the meetings after the fact, unless they had to for their job. Like that was really difficult, because we knew what we're like together, and we like hanging out, and how we, there's a level of like real world energy and fun, and that just felt like it was sucked away from the screen. And there's an alternate universe where that experience was different, and the magic was still there, and we just went virtual forever after that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happy that it isn't that way.
I'm also happy that it isn't that way, but I mean, like, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Maybe one of us moves away or something like that, and that is the only solution for it to go forward. I'm not like unwilling to like do that if it's necessary, but if we have the option, I think this is better.
That's exactly it. We've been doing this for over 5 years. If this is going to last another 5 years, Scott might move to Toronto.
Yeah.
And we will figure it out, and the podcast will not go away because of that. We will just find our way. And I feel like we could. And then there's always the upside too. It's like, well, shit, if we were virtual, then it would be so much easier for us to get guests.
Yeah.
Because the virtual door is open. And we've been pretty adamant about not doing virtual guests, because again, just that experience and the real world conversation and the really looking into someone's eyes and like absorbing all that stuff, it's different. Also, from a the technical aspect, the quality level of audio, of having a real experience, that everything is kind of universal. Nothing bothers me more than I'm listening to a podcast and one of the 3 people that are on it, the audio is noticeably worse.
Just using a webcam microphone.
Yeah, it just drives me fucking batshit crazy. And like, that's the majority. Like, most people don't have great podcast setups in their home office or whatever, and you don't necessarily expect them to. And so we want somebody here. Not only do we want to have a real world experience, so you all feel like you're right in the room with us having the real conversation, because a real conversation is not the same virtually as it is in person, and anyone that tells you that is full of shit.
Yeah. It's just like a lot of I don't know if you guys notice this, but John like leaves gaps for me to like throw in quips, and like he does the same thing when I'm speaking, and that kind of thing does not exist in a virtual setting.
No.
Because if I interrupt him in a virtual setting, on his end, he's 250 milliseconds ahead of me, and he's already moving on because that gap's over, and then I'm speaking, and then he begins his sentence, and then he hears what I'm saying, and he's like, and then it's like awkward, and then he's like, okay, you done? Okay, now I'm gonna continue. It just murders that. It completely murders that. But also about guests, I am extremely proud of our guest episodes. There is no podcast, and I can say this with confidence, in our space that comes close to the number and breadth of guests we've had. We've had Guy, we've had Luke, we've had Alex, we've had Broadsword, we've had both of them on. We've had Jeremy from Black Magic Craft. We've had Sam. We've had Vince. We've had Uncle Adam. 8 different guests from 8 different YouTube channels. And there's probably more that I'm forgetting right now.
Dude, you remember Blake?
Fucking Blake.
If
that was such an unhinged episode.
Yeah. If you want the craziest episode that has ever been for Trapped Under Plastic, and you have not heard the early on episode with Blake from Life After the Cover Save, do yourself a service.
Yeah.
And fucking find that one and cue it up. Yeah. That man,
he's hilarious,
is amazing.
Yeah.
I thought I go off deep ends and random shit. And I'm like, I feel like I'm the fucking Eldar on the side of the ship as it's capsizing, trying to hold on for dear life with that fucker.
Yeah.
It kind of like opened the doors of like, oh, John, you can go further.
That's where it changed.
That's where it changed. I truly believe that's where it changed. Don Haney.
Dan Mawson.
Yeah, we've had some great ones, and
Some
we need
great
Don.
guests.
We need Don on yet again, don't we?
Yeah, he's great.
Has he been on twice now?
Twice, yeah.
Twice, yeah. I feel like it should almost be an annual thing with Don, because Don is like, he's the Don father. Like he's got so much wisdom, and I mean, he reminds me of James Earl Jones in so many ways. Also, he kind of looks like James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
But he's just so, and weird thing, older guy, been in this hobby for fucking longer than I've been alive probably, but still so fucking funny. He's got his dry sense of humor. He's always like, you can see this little glisten in his eye, and I'm like, oh, Don, you're up to something. Like, what a great person. And like, we want to do more. Also, the TUP Lives. Like, we have guests on those. And those are a bit unhinged, too.
Yeah, they definitely are.
And that is one thing that we put on our agenda for this week's meeting. We didn't get to, because an hour goes by fast, but we also have to hold ourselves to things, right? Like, this could turn into 3 hours. If our 1 hour meeting turned into 3 hours, we would stop doing it because it would be too big of a lift. So we hold ourselves at an hour, but now we know next month, beginning of March, our main focus of our meeting is TUP Live at Adepticon.
Yeah.
Right? That's usually something when we drive down together, we just like make sure we have the right gear. I make sure Scott is grateful enough to like bring the right gear that we need, and we just kind of discuss it on our 4-hour drive.
Yeah.
But one, we're not going to be able to do that this year because we're driving separately. But two, that's also not the strategic way to do that. If we need any headway, we needed to make decisions that will impact things. We need to structure, set up the document. We need to ask people if we're going to have guests and what that looks like, and are we going to reformat the way that we do our live episodes. And we need to do research on things like other podcasts that do live episodes and other like comedic groups that do live episodes. What do they do? Is there things that we can learn from, and that kind of thing that really work. We did a bit of that before, where like that's kind of the core of usually those live episodes is the live Q&A, and I think that's definitely
got to be a part of it.
It's got to be a part of it, because we want to hear your silly voices in a microphone, and we want to hear your questions, because that's curveballs that we cannot prepare for, and I think that's fun.
Oh my gosh.
But outside of that, are there other things that are more valuable for a live experience that are still good audio content for the goody peepees that can't come to the conventions and still find value in those? So there's a lot of questions around that. And just like we're doing here, where we're trying to make small incremental changes, and we're going to then, after we've made a change, we are going to not make a bunch of extra changes too soon, so we can really check on, did that change affect us positively, negatively? What's the ups and downsides before we, make another change or go back? So
we want to take it seriously, I think hopefully gone are the days of us deciding what the topic of the episode's going to be the hour before we record it, I feel like we're just doing you dirty, Has that really impacted the conversation in like a way that maybe you can tell? Maybe not. But the thing is, I think it can get better. If we decide earlier on what we're going to discuss, and we can premeditate it and have some like things that are really insightful, like ready to go right at the jump, I think that's just going to make for a more interesting conversation, We want to make a better show for you. That's really what it comes down to. I want to care and be creatively engaged in the podcast. And when I feel like we're both kind of just like running on fumes, that's when the podcast is least fun for me to do. When it's like, when it feels like a chore. But when we invest in it creatively, then I get excited about it.
You're right.
I am more excited today than I have been. I feel really energized. And I think that's important. I think that comes across in the episode.
Yeah, that was one thing I did not expect, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Very pleasantly surprised, is that after that 1 hour together, I felt not that hour was drained away from my work week.
Yeah.
I felt it was like a really exciting use for that hour, and pushed us in a way that will help us long term, and it makes me excited for the next one.
Yep. 100%.
So, and we may even decide that once a month is not often enough, or that opens the door to something we discussed. It was like, okay, we're going to do this the first Wednesday of every single month. We're going to do this, and if we're going to make there's some bigger project or some bigger changes or some really interesting, exciting new thing. And again, change will always be for something that excites us and that we think is going to make the podcast better. And that I want to framework the word change for that reason, a positive evolution, maybe a better way to phrase it. That may require we meet another time until our next meeting. And I think because these feel so good that I don't think we will like wince at that thought
and skip out on it, you know,
Right.
like that'd be really easy to like, I'll be like, okay, I got to paint something. I can't do this today because it is so positive. I kind of want to spring a question on you.
Okay.
Assuming like our podcast succeeds more and we're better about managing it and it becomes more profitable, I'm curious in what way you want to see the podcast grow and change. And I have one thing, so I'll start.
Okay.
It's always been a dream of mine. Back in the day with Patreon, you used to have these like goals where it's like when we hit this many patrons or this number of dollars per month, we're gonna do a reward. And I think that's kind of largely gone away on Patreon. I think Patreon is changing. But my idea that we never like put into writing on the website was when we hit this goal, we're going to fly this person in and they're going to be a guest on the podcast. I would love if we had disposable income because the podcast was earning more money to fly someone in, fly in a Duncan Rhodes, fly in a, what was that guy's name? Who is like that CEO of Harder and Steenbeck, who is just so much fun to talk to.
Because his name is like a different name, but it's not that same name.
Yeah.
It's like
Who's the guy who plays Willow? What's his name? What's that actor's name?
Warwick.
Yes, it's not Warwick Davis. But his name is Warwick, right?
Warwick, yeah. Not
Yeah.
Warwick. Warwick.
Warwick.
Good call on the Willow reference.
Yeah.
You brought that home. Warwick.
But that guy is so much fun, and our brief conversation with him in England was just so insightful. It was so interesting, you know?
We get into his Audi,
Yeah.
which is first and foremost
Immediately
Harder
a
and-
vibe check. Yeah.
Harder and Steenbeck is a German company.
Yeah.
And it was an A8. So if you're a gearhead, you know that the A8 is the big luxury version of the Audi.
Could have been an R8, you know? Could have been a sports car.
Maybe it was an R8. I don't know. Either way, it was fucking glorious. And these tiny little narrow roads that he's not even from this area and not sure where we're supposed to go. The GPS on the car was kind of confusing and running us around. Couldn't figure out where to park. And in that like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he had so many fucking mind bombs that he dropped on us about airbrushes.
Yeah, and the design of them and how it's supposed to work. Yeah.
While he's driving, and half his attention is somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
He's a smooth operator, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And so, like, absolutely. I think we even had that discussion, like, within the week after that moment that, like, we should get this guy on the podcast, and we'd love to have him on.
Yeah.
But that's a great thing. Like, yeah, you know, if there's like, oh my gosh, the goody peepees are like, they really want us to bring in so-and-so and stuff like that. Like I would love to be able to do that. And
amazing. Maybe we could maybe we could pester like Emil from Squidmar to come over at some point. He's probably mega busy, but like it'd be so cool to have all these and like display painters, you know, like
we need Willie Hanna, we need Eric Swinson.
Yeah, what the fuck? That'd be so cool to have. That's
Roman,
bro. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we need Roman the Pot on here.
My gosh.
That I feel like that would be like Miyagi.
Yeah, it would be. And so I feel like if we had the disposable income and we could afford it, it'd be amazing to fly people out, you know, put them in a hotel and then have them as a guest in this podcast. That's probably like super far future, you know. But still, that would just be like, that'd be so cool. I would love that.
Right. Yeah. There's ways that like one of the things that we talk about in the businessy meetings is like opportunities for financial growth for the podcast. And this may be the boring part that y'all don't necessarily care about, but it's not that we're even trying to grow to like leech more money. What we're trying to do is like for the success that this podcast has, as opposed to most podcasts of its size, we actually like just don't take advantage of a lot of things that most other podcasts do. They have more regular ad reads. They have these ads that run in their podcast. If you're a podcast past listener, you probably recognize that we have next to none compared to all these other ones. And And it's not that we want to spoon feed you more ads, and that's not what we're trying to do, but it's like, well, if we have opportunities to make some more money on the podcast so we can invest that money in the podcast and do cool things and, really show us that like these meetings and growth and change that we can create to make the podcast better can lead to us doing more cool things. It's us going to more conventions and doing TUP Lives. And it's just so it's like, well, you don't go to Adepticon, but you do go to Nova, or you do go to some Spiel in Germany or whatever that is. Like it opens up more opportunities for us. Or maybe it's us being able to afford to pay more people to help us in more things, so the show is better because we can afford to bring in more people to help us and that kind of thing, and little steps. But yeah, that's the end of the day is like, we've been doing this for 5.5 years and not making a ton of money off it. And I'm fine if this podcast never makes another dime than it does, other than the fact that like, is that holding it back from being a better podcast? And that being a better podcast is really what we want.
Yeah.
So
yes, 100%. That is exactly what we want. I want to feel like we are both creatively invested in the podcast, in its growth and its success. And that's what really gets me jazzed about doing it, is when I am excited about a thing and then I'm going to chase it, I just don't like to settle. I don't know why I don't like to settle. But I just love, change and variety and poking at things and trying to make things work and make things better and more efficient. And this is just kind of part of that.
I think that's why you find yourself in the situation that you're in with your Dark Eldar.
I know.
Because you don't want to settle. Yeah. And that is actually it's like overall, that is a big boon to you as a professional, to you as running your own business, that 9 times out of 10, that is only going to help you. 1 time out of 10, you got to paint 5 of those fucking ships. Twinkie ships.
Twinkie ships.
Dude, the fucking Twinkie ships are going to get you. But that's absolutely true. I can pick up a ball and really want to grow it and make it better and whatever, and then I could put that ball down and pick up a different ball, and I can live with that ball that I set down being where it is. I think a little bit it stresses me out less than it stresses you out. So that is something that we're really trying to find a way that how Scott and I can work best together, because we work really well together when this camera is running. But when the majority of our work is us in our own studios making all the decisions for our videos, for our painting, for everything, for our own channels, just ourselves, we are not beholden to anyone else. It's difficult to put on a different hat for a partnership when it's the same kind of, it's still miniatures, it's still creating videos, it's still whatever. And that's something that we've learned we need to get better at, of us being better communicators with each other and giving ourselves those times to just sit down and to do that communicating. And that it makes things that so we're on the same page is so important. But also we have this level of joint excitement in that we are true partners in this. And also it reminded me in that very first meeting that I have someone that's going to help me,
Right.
That's such a big thing. And like, I don't have to have every decision. I don't have to have every answer. I have a partner, and then there's things that we can help each other on. And that's really cool. And I really value that. And it's, I'm looking forward to more of that. I realized I never answered your question.
That's okay.
What was the question again?
The question was like, if the podcast were to grow and there were to have expendable resources, whatever they are, it could be money, it could be time, I don't know. Like, in what way would you like to see the podcast grow in like a more exciting way? Like, I know for a while you've talked about having is this other wall here and like a couch for like a guest. Like that'd be like a physical way that like the set would grow, not necessarily the episode itself. But like, in what way would you want to see it change?
I think it would be cool if there's stuff in this podcast that probably clips and stuff that would work really well in the shorts community.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
That people that don't know it as well, or it's just kind of good if you listen to it to hear the 30-second story of Burger King smells or whatever, the origin of the ducks and all that kind of stuff. Everything's a duck. That's the TLDR. Everything's a duck. So we live in an alternate universe where ducks are the AI that are running the simulation that we are all living in. And I hate to be the person that opens this Pandora's box to all of you, but
in case you didn't know already.
Right. Yeah. I would like to be able to make more cool shit for the podcast. We want to have cool shirts. We want to have fucking cool things that are hobby related that you're going to want to do. And it's not just merch, but just like stuff that's like, yeah, podcast stuff. I want more podcast stuff. I think that would be cool. I'd like that. I would like shorts. I would like us to, if it's successful and people like it, would like to be more places. Here's my pie in the sky thing that's probably never going to happen because it still is a niche hobby.
Yes, this is what I want to hear.
Okay?
Pie in the sky.
I want us to be able to rent out a theater for a live showing that is not related to a convention. Okay. And we could sell out the tickets.
Okay.
And that could be a 500-seat theater.
Okay.
And that we have the TUP live show, that it's not at a convention. It is its own thing. And people would come, and we have a blast for 2-3 hours together, and it's a show. It is its own show. And we have fucking opening act where we sing Creed songs.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
We just lost all of our sales right there.
Right? Yes. So
does it end with an hour of speed painting, drunk mini painting?
Yeah. If that means we could sell at a 500-seat theater, that would be the final hour of the episode.
Is this a tour thing, or is this a one-time thing?
Oh, yeah. If you do it, you probably do a tour. You
don't have to. We could just do one in Minnesota.
Yeah. It could. So you have to do your first one to see how it works.
Yeah.
Right. Because the tough thing is like that's asking a lot because our audience is all over the world, right? Because miniature hobby, as much as it's grown, is not condensed enough in any given region, which is why like stand-up comics, if they're doing a big stadium tour or something, they do a tour so they can go to Memphis and they go to Orlando and they go to Austin and then they go to San Jose and then they go to Denver, and I'm gonna keep naming cities, and they go around because there's enough people within any one of those cities distance that will come and fill the spots. This is why this is a pie in the sky thing, because we're all over the fucking place.
Yeah.
You know? Even a place like Adepticon that gets like 8,000 people last year. People come from all over the world now it'll be Milwaukee for that. It's not that there's 8,000 people within a day's drive or 2 days, driving distance of Adepticon. So that's why it's pie in the sky.
Yeah,
but
that's what I want to hear, though. I love those big ideas. I feel like even in my own YouTube channel, the big ideas are what really like give me the fuel to like do the everyday work. It's like okay, there is a world where I can do this really cool thing in the future if I just kind of like eat my dog food for a little bit. And I don't want to like pretend like me painting miniatures is eating dog food. It absolutely is not. But like the level of excitement that I may have for painting a single fig compared to like where I could potentially see a business growing in 5 years, there's a difference there. And so it's a helpful motivating force.
Oh yeah, the big rocks are what excites you to push the little rocks.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Abso-freaking-lutely. We're rolling into maybe 2 hours in this podcast.
Okay.
How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay.
This is a little bit of State of the Union for the podcast listeners about this, but it's something that excites us. It's something that it's probably long overdue, but that is okay. It's not so long overdue that the podcast kind of fizzled or degraded before we realized it. And that's where I consider us very fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing we didn't actually just come out and say, and I think it's important to always just say your intention, is that I think our podcast functions well as being your virtual hobby friend. The hobby is a very solitary hobby. You often do it alone in your basement, and there's not anyone to really do it with, unless there are some of us who are fortunate enough to have a game store nearby that has a painting night, or a buddy who's also engaged in the hobby alongside us. I don't actually know what the stats are. I don't know how many of you paint alone, how many of you paint with people. I paint almost exclusively alone.
Same.
So it's just nice to have someone to be in your ear, chatting about the hobby and stuff like that. So you're not like alone. And if you don't want to be alone, you know? And so I think that's really what we're trying to prioritize is being your virtual hobby friend.
Yeah. So please be our friend.
Please.
Won't you be our hobby friend?
Nice. Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, we're just workshopping merch ideas now.
Maybe a cardigan?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah.
With a fucking giant back patch on it. Like, just
won't you be my hobby friend?
Yeah. And it's like Mr. Rogers, but like he has like sleeves, like of tattoos.
Sleeve tattoos.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was one of those. Wasn't that one of those, speaking of urban legends with Burger King, wasn't one of the urban legends with that Mr. Rogers? That's why he always wore a sweater. Was because he had tattoos all over his arms.
I don't know.
I feel like that's a thing.
That's hilarious.
There was also a different one. Was that Bob Ross? Like he used to be in the military and was like a real serious like assassin or something like that in the military too.
There's like a really good, I don't know if you call it a biopic or what you would call it, but a movie about both of those people. Mr. Rogers has a narrative film where like he has.
Is that Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yeah, he has Forrest Gump. Actor Tom
Hanks.
Tom Hanks plays him in a more of a narrative movie, and then he has more of like a biography biopic movie about him, and then Bob Ross also has a thing that's kind of more historical and more of a documentary.
I should watch those.
I've only seen the Won't You Be My Neighbor. I haven't seen the other two that I mentioned.
I know Won't You Be My Neighbor was up for some awards.
Yeah, it was good. It was great. It was great.
Okay, we're going to watch that. So here's our to put a little stamp on the end of that main topic is a movie recommendation.
Yeah.
Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Welcome to the end of the podcast. We just spoke for 2 hours and 49 minutes.
God damn it. And the funny thing is in the after party, we learned all about Emperor Palpatine's nutsack, and the goody peepees that weren't there, they're not going to have that great mental picture.
Yeah. I mean, don't you want that mental picture?
This is a part of our new section of the after party. It's just all about swinging nutsacks like they're lassos. Like we're playing a game of futuristic Red Dead Redemption, and we're trying to catch the tantas with our own nutsacks.
That was the opening of that burlesque show. Was the
Tauntauns
dying, and then Han, I believe, or it was Luke going inside the tauntaun, but it was significantly sexier.
I don't know how it could be more sexy.
Anyways, you gotta get out of the Patreon if you want to hear about that. But if you guys like the show, let us know what you think of this new reordering of the format. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from the diehard fans. We want to make this show better for you. While also making it more successful if we can. We want to balance those two things. So let us know if you like the order and if you like kind of the new energy that's going on here. Also, if you want to support the show, there's a number of ways you can do that. We mentioned the Patreon before. That's a huge way you can do it. You can also pick up some merch down in the show notes below. We have a Teespring where we sell cool shirts, cool cups, cool leggings, all kinds of stuff with a variety of designs for the show on there with some fun references to tendies and canes, all sorts of good stuff. You can also watch the show on YouTube. We play an ad every 30 minutes, and that helps us make some money as well at no extra expense to you.
Now, we have to go do more important businessy meetings, and by that I mean eat chicky nuggies. So we're going to be back in a fortnight. And until then, we'll catch you on the
Flippity flop.